Can you even imagine trying to turn off one of the world's greatest natural wonders? It sounds like something from a myth, right? Like trying to stop the tide from coming in. But it actually happened. We're talking about Niagara Falls, that thundering, magnificent roar, suddenly silenced.
Just look at this picture. No, that is not a dried up canyon on another planet. That is the American Falls, completely bone dry. Yep, back in 1969, a team of engineers pulled off what seemed absolutely impossible. They literally flipped a switch on a huge part of Niagara Falls. So let's get into the incredible story of how, and more importantly, why they did it.
So why in the world would you want to stop Niagara Falls? Well, it wasn't just for kicks. By the 1960s, there was a genuine fear that the American Falls were basically falling apart.
And the key to this whole thing, the word you need to know is talus. It's a simple geology term. Talus is just that big pile of rubble and rocks you see at the bottom of a cliff. And let me tell you, by the middle of the 20th century, the talus at the foot of the American Falls was getting enormous. You see, there were these huge rock falls in 1931 and again in 1954 that dumped thousands and thousands of tons of rock down below. This talus pile got so big that it was burying the waterfall from the bottom up, cutting its visible height almost in half. People worried that one more big rock slide and that iconic, beautiful drop would just turn into a long, boring slide of water. The magic would be gone forever.
But here's where the story gets really interesting. As incredible as the 1969 project was, it turns out humans weren't the first ones to silence the falls. Nope, nature beat us to it by over 100 years.
And the difference between the two events is just wild. Check it out. In 1848, a natural ice dam stops the water for about 30 hours, and people literally thought it was the end of the world. Then, in 1969, we do it on purpose for 5 months, and what happens? It becomes a massive tourist spectacle. Same result, a silent waterfall, but a completely different cause and a totally opposite reaction.
Can you imagine waking up one morning in March of 1848 and the constant roar you've lived with your whole life is just gone? Total silence? A huge ice jam way up on Lake Erie had basically put a cork in the Niagara River. Mill wheels ground to a halt. Some folks panicked. But others, the more adventurous ones, actually walked out onto the dry riverbed and found old muskets and bayonets left over from the War of 1812. And then poof, just as fast as it stopped, the ice dam broke and the thunder came roaring back.
So yeah, the 1848 event was a total fluke of nature. The 1969 project, though, that was the exact opposite. It was a massive, carefully planned, deliberate effort to dewater the falls. Honestly, it was one of the boldest engineering projects of its time.
So, how do you stop 60,000 gallons of water rushing past you every single second? Well, you build a really big wall. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built what's called a cofferdam, using almost 28,000 tons of rock and dirt. The scale of this is just hard to wrap your head around.
And this wasn't some small thing. The dam stretched 600 feet, all the way across the Niagara River, just upstream from the falls. It essentially acted like a giant roadblock, rerouting the entire American side of the river over to Canada's Horseshoe Falls.
And they built it insanely fast. Get this, a fleet of over 1,200 trucks worked nonstop, around the clock, for just 3 days straight to dump all that material into the river and build the dam. Talk about a logistical masterpiece.
So the game plan was pretty simple on paper, but crazy complicated in real life. Step 1, build that monster dam. Step 2, reroute all that water. Step 3, spend the next 5 months studying the now exposed cliff face. And then, the grand finale, Step 4. On November 25th, 1969, they dynamited the temporary dam and let the river roar back to life.
With the water finally out of the way, the real work could begin. You had engineers and geologists rappelling down that 100-foot cliff face in these little safety cages. From there, they mapped every single crack, they drilled for rock samples, they installed sensors, all to figure out exactly what was making the waterfall crumble.
But of course, when you turn off a waterfall, you don't just find rocks. For the first time in something like 12,000 years, people got a chance to see what was hiding at the bottom of the Niagara River.
And here's the funny thing, instead of killing tourism, the dry falls became the hottest ticket in town. People flocked to see this once-in-a-lifetime bizarre sight. Like this one tourist said, seeing the falls without water was somehow even more incredible than seeing them with it.
So what they find down there? Well, for starters, millions of coins people had tossed in for good luck over the years. A little darker, they also found the remains of 2 people. But the biggest find, the real shocker, was a geological twist nobody saw coming. That big pile of talus, the very thing they were there to get rid of, was actually acting like a natural support brace, holding the cliff together and slowing down erosion.
So after 5 months of all that work, all that study, the final recommendation was to do absolutely nothing. Yep, they figured out that removing the rock pile would be way too expensive and could actually make the problem worse by speeding up erosion. The best engineering solution was to just leave it alone.
But the story of us meddling with Niagara doesn't just stop in 1969. That project was really a demonstration of how much control we have over the falls, and it's a practice that's still happening every single day. This might actually blow your mind. The Niagara Falls you see today is basically on a dimmer switch. Because of a treaty from 1950, a huge amount of water is diverted away from the falls to create hydroelectric power. During the day when all the tourists are there, half the water is siphoned off. But at night, they divert a whopping 75% of the river. And all this engineering has a massive long-term effect. By turning down the flow, we've slowed down the natural erosion of the falls by over 85%. We are essentially preserving the falls in place, freezing that perfect postcard image that we all know and love.
Historian Daniel McFarland doesn't mince words. He calls the modern Niagara Falls a completely man-made and artificial cataract. It's a really powerful statement that makes you second-guess what you're really looking at when you stand there.
And that really brings us to the big question, doesn't it? We look at this incredible site as a symbol of raw, untamed nature, but after a century of dams and diversions and turning it on and off, is Niagara Falls still a natural wonder, or have we turned it into something else? A breathtaking but ultimately human-managed spectacle. It's definitely something to think about.